YouTube? GK's back with a Sekiro Shadows Die Twice. It's what the critics said, and we're gonna move quicker this time. So first up, IGN. Brandon Tyrell writes a very thorough essay of review about the game and kind of speaks to the Souls veterans at first. Talks about the combat system, and how things are pretty much equivalent to bonfires from Dark Souls or lanterns from Bloodborne's, talking about the sculpture's idols. As this is a way to kind of save your game, Brandon also writes that he never felt like he had to go too far to find the next idol and bank his progress. If anyone knows the series, your skill points are kind of the only way to level up, but Sekiro kind of changes this and makes it so that weapons or your prosthetic tools are upgraded more so than your actual stats. And this has its own advantages because it being a single player game, as Brandon writes, the most immediately noticeable pro is that due to the fact there's no persistent multiplayer, you're able to pause mid-fight, making it so that you can actually toss healing items while you're fighting a boss. This first essay is to serve as some background, some mechanics since it's so long, and to give players an idea of the overall flow of the game was my intention with these first couple quotes. Now we jump into Sekiro's combat is skill-based swordsmanship that requires a mastery of an excellent new countering system. While this countering system is new, it never feels not Dark Souls, not Bloodborne, not From Software, if you get what I'm saying there. And Tyrell kind of agrees with this kind of somewhat. And because there are ample clues and hints throughout the world that let you draw correct conclusions, it's easy to blow through the journey without ever needing to stop and ponder, as I've come to expect in a From Software game. So now that we set up what a From Soft game kind of is, if you didn't already know, they're known for being hard, and to explore somewhat in a weird non-RPG-like way that was unique at first all those many years ago. Brandon's saying that he never feels he has to think about anything because the story is so linear, and you're given a task, you complete the task, you move on. I thought that was actually a better part of Sekiro because there were obvious and clear choices that had real impact and influence. And of course, as a From Software game, you always have multiple endings. I think Tyrell did a great job here. His final score is a 9.5. Amazing. Sekiro Shadows Die Twice is a stylishly focused stealth action take on the From Software formula that evolves in a different and refreshing direction. It may be a bit easier than a Souls game, but it's something amazing all its own. Moving on to Natalie Dengrafried, I know I mispronounced that, I am sorry. The Kotaku review. She again writes a lot, quite a bit, and I suggest reading it. The player quickly becomes the butt of that joke, as Sekiro is punishingly difficult. This should be shocking to roughly no one, given that it's made by From Software, developer of the infamously challenging Souls games and Bloodborne. She talks about her time spent with the game and getting used to what Bloodborne's and Soulsborne types games are really about, and quickly goes into our kind of a pros and cons list for Kotaku. It's about 60 hours and counting so far for the Kotaku review. Previously, it definitely has been revised and they no longer have the counting. Stealth got stale. It was one of her dislikes. She liked the fighting and figuring it out. Seems she really liked the struggle of Sekiro. What wasn't a blast was the feeling that I was repeating myself. Sekiro's winding world is full of near duplicate mini boss fights, and I often found myself asking why. I'm guessing the developers of the game were trying to coax the player into reconsidering their approaches to boss fights, but I found that I wasn't really forced to do that in several of these repeat encounters, nor did I even really feel the satisfaction of being able to curb stomp an enemy that had previously once, beat her up. These are some clearing negatives about the game. Duplicate mini boss fights. She somewhat here lost the appeal for what Sekiro kind of is. I'm not interjecting any of my opinions here, just want to really focus on them. The reviewers. Natalie also said that, but there are stealth moments that Sekiro really gets right, really right, in addition to a couple unique sequence chases that she won't spoil. Odd, because she had just really said that stealth got old. The question she had coming in was, will this be worth it? After moving through countless cycles of life and death, tensing, raging, and difficulty, conquering my challenges and letting go of any fear, anger like the Buddha, I decided that it was. So in all, Natalie decided that the journey of Sekiro was worth it. That's an interesting point that we'll come back to later, but we're going to keep moving on to GamesRadar. Sekiro, Shadows Die Twice review, genius combat, and a world that begs to be explored by Samuel Horty. Love GamesRadar for jumping right into their pros and cons list. Pros: sizzling combat that forces you to be aggressive, a branching world full of secrets to find, a clear story mixed with cryptic side quests. Cons: shoddy stealth with AI that's easy to fool. These should cause one to really think, because we've already now heard a few more contradictions. A branching world full of secrets to find. Well, we've heard from other reviewers that it's really not that, and there was no pause to ponder and reflect, and the side quests were barely mentioned throughout the other reviews. Clearly that pro of the combat, but we heard another negative to the stealth. It's shoddy stealth. Natalie loved the stealth, but then felt it got old. So I'm not sure how we should feel about the stealth in the game as of right now. But keeping it moving, Sekiro, Shadows Die Twice makes you rethink everything you know about boss fights. My plan for beating the Guardian Ape was to stay well away of foot stomps and guard smashes occasionally, and it continues on. I remember the Guardian Ape myself, it was very hard. But did it make me rethink everything I know about boss fights, in particular from a From Software game? We'll have to wait till later to find kind of out. No two fights feel the same, as well as the haunted headless ape mentions again. The key point there is no two fights feel the same, yet we heard a different reviewer say that they were kind of consistent and non-changing little fights and boss fights, that there was a lot of monotony through the game in terms of the designs of bosses and stuff, except for this ape and a few others that we've heard of. Kind of surprising here, a little contradictory. Outside of combat, poetic writing and a vast branching setting makes Sekiro a joy to explore. Its story is more straightforward than From Software's previous games, which is a good thing. This reviewer thinks that the more straightforward story here may not necessarily be better, but it is different and good in its own way to a From Software's type of game. Thought that was an interesting point there. The environments can feel samey early on, and you'll spend hours hopping across roofs and cut and paste pagodas. Later, locations are more varied, if a little uninspiring. So here we have that duality again, kind of. My only other complaint is with the camera, which can't deal with tight spaces. I mean, that's a little nitpick, right? Because it's not necessarily a game-breaking camera issue. So we'll just move on to the final score. And the final score is a 4 out of 5. Sekiro has the best sword fights in any video game. It leans too heavily on its mediocre stealth, but its satisfying combat will keep you going through hundreds of brutal deaths. Interesting final thoughts. Definitely go over that later, or a little bit right now actually. We hear the stealth again, and the claim that Sekiro has the best sword fights in any video game is a very strong claim, especially when the review and the score only gives it a 4 out of 5. When you're playing a sword fighting game, I don't know what you want to be better than the sword fights, but on to Metacritic. Metacritic here, we have an unusual, maybe not unusual, but the meta score is higher than the user score, a 90 and a 7.9. So this is definitely a cause for investigation. So we'll look at these reviews. There's only one negative critic review, but 80 other negative user reviews. So we're going to look at a wide array here. We're gonna look at Saint Magazine. You might have heard this person mentioned in a different video. That's actually why I picked him this time. I'm trying to decide if this is just a hater or not. However, an interesting point is made. It's boss fights, highlighting the contrived lengths that From Software has gone in order to satisfy players' thirst for difficulty. It's quite harsh, I agree. However, there is some merit of truth to Slant Magazine and what he's saying here, or she's saying here, and we might cover that later. Daily Star. Though Sekiro feels impossibly hard at times, the level of euphoria you experience when delivering a death blow to a tricky boss or when you finally clear a castle grounds of all enemies is almost unparalleled. Almost unparalleled, right? It's just almost. Dread731 says, frustratingly difficult even for Soulsborne vets. Fairly bland world without much variation. No gear drops, no way to change appearances. Why? These design choices were made by From Software for this installment of a Souls game. Let's just at the very least call it that. And Dread here is just calling those things out, which none of the reviewers actually mentioned that as more of a negative. They mentioned that it's different, but here's the ways that it's positive. They don't say it so clear cut as Dread here. Gamer39 said, okay, so the game is beautiful. I loved the game for a few days until I got up to the Hirata Estate, and then I realized that I hated it. This sentiment here is really striking because I myself may have had some instances where I had that same feeling, as if this wasn't worth it. To put it in Natalie's terms, would the game be worth it? And as of right now, we'll just kind of keep it going. It's my favorite phrase to say. Predator73, awesome game like Dark Souls and Bloodborne. Difficulty is hard, bosses are tough, skills and upgrades are very innovative. 100 hours playing time. Prismon 1304, I was definitely sure it would be a great game. From Software never fails. I took a few hours to play and that's what I expected. I'm in. Two positives, because the reviews are ultimately way more positive than negative for Sekiro. So I thought you guys should know that for Metacritic. Moving on to Polygon. Shadows die more than twice, over 50 hours in. If you've noticed, a lot of the reviews are talking about how long the game is. Long games are usually a positive, most times. It's full of masochistic challenges, but it's also definitely not a Soulsborne game. It's something new, something intriguing, and a brutal and definitive statement refuting the idea that From Software is a one-trick pony. I thought these lines were so great. They were very, very well written, I might add, by, I think I almost forgot who it was, Dave Tack and Jeffrey Parkin. Two reviewers this time for this one review. Sorry I didn't mention that before. However, I love this line so much, I just want to get right to it. Is it not a Soulsborne game? Contradictory to me, I believe this is a full Soulsborne game, and it doesn't really do that much new. However, the reviewers for Polygon seem to think so we'll jump into some of their quotes here. Sekiro is immensely more narratively accessible than its Soulsborne predecessors. That is true. It's straightforward story, as we've heard so far. There's not much choice left in there in the beginning parts of the game at the very least. Gameplay isn't as dire as the Prepare to Die promised on the first Dark Souls box, but that rhythm of struggling, dying, learning, and repeating is a huge part of Sekiro. So it's kind of not as hard, according to these two reviewers, than a Dark Souls game, really. However, a lot of the other reviewers also mentioned how hard the game was, but a real treat to master and high skill ceilings. Each death is an excuse for contemplation, and I often have to take a step back to find the logic and progress that stem from my failures. They're almost always my fault, which is how From Software gets away with making absurdly punishing, and it continues, games. Contemplation, we've heard that word contemplation twice. However, these reviewers, I guess a duo, are referring to contemplating about battle and not contemplating about the world. Sekiro isn't difficult for difficult's sake. Well, Slant Magazine seems to differ with that one. And we'll just continue with our last quote here. I have to put in a lot of work and effort to make Sekiro on its own terms. Again, you've heard this term or phrase multiple times in multiple videos from multiple reviewers, meeting something on its own terms. So they really enjoyed the game, and those are all the reviews for Sekiro Shadows Die Twice. We're gonna take all the scores, do some quick math, and I'll be back in a second. So by taking all our averages, an 80 and 95, taking Metacritic scores 90 and 79, averaging those together to get an 84.5, then finding out that Kotaku and Polygon, since they don't give a numerical score, we take what they say in the review and use whatever numbers we have accumulated. So we'll give them the two highest scores we have in order of fairness, so to get a 95 and a 90 totaled in, and then we take that total average and get a final score for Sekiro Shadows Die Twice at an 88.9. Now I actually feel that this average score is very fair for the game, and I'll leave that there for now and get into some of the points as why I think it is kind of fair. While I don't think the game was amazing, there were few and far between big moments that really stuck. However, I expected more from From Software Sekiro than a Soulsborne game, and it was that. And I thought that it could have been good, but with the Japan setting as well, there are a few other titles that I was more excited about for Japan than from Software, so that also took a hit for me as well. But if you saw E3, their newest entry, who they're working with R. Martin, that game might actually be the game. So while I'm not saying skip or buy Sekiro Shadows Die Twice, because all gamers are different and they play things for different reasons, I will say for me, the next coming title could potentially be the last From Software game I play, because it no longer does that for me, and a lot of the titles in the Soulsborne don't. There's a lot of indie Soulsborne games that are actually really good, and caught the magic of Dark Souls and flipped it their own way. But right now, Souls is stagnant, and I'm a fan, huge fan, but it is. And Sekiro's review at an 88.9 can sit there, even though I might feel it could be a little too high there. That might be my own personal fandom coming out, that I am going to give it even lower of a score there. But an 88.9 is fair. Deserved. However, just not the 88.9 I wanted to see. So let me know what you thought about the reviews. And up next, something different.